Hi, my name is Leo and I'm a boat builder and a sailor, and I'm on a mission to rebuild and restore this 111-year-old classic sailing yacht, Tally-Ho. Now recently I've been thinking a lot about the boat's deck. We're going to be laying it relatively soon, and so I've been doing a lot of design work, figuring out the location, the positions of the deck strakes, the coverboards, the king planks and so on. That process is a little bit like lofting, a little bit like lining out the hull planks, but a bit different to both those as well. So this video is going to be looking at that and looking at a lot of different boats and different types of deck, different construction styles and so on. I'm also going to be taking a short break to go sailing on a beautiful schooner, and we're expecting a very exciting timber delivery. So boat decks come in all different shapes and sizes and designs, and I'm going to show you a few different decks in the boatyard and different parts of those decks. So the first thing I'm going to show you is coverboards. Coverboards are the boards which run around the outside, around the perimeter of the deck, and usually they're wider than a regular deck plank, and they're called coverboards because they cover up the hull planking, the shear strake. They cover up that joint between the outside of the hull and the deck structure. Now the first job I'm going to do in laying out my deck is figure out where my coverboards are going to go, where the joints between them are going to be, and work out if I've actually got enough stock to make them. And so the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to actually make a plywood template for every piece of teak that I have in the appropriate size, and I'm going to take all those templates up on deck and I'm going to actually just lay them out where the coverboards will be, to make sure that there's enough of them to make up the coverboards, and then I can sort of jigsaw them around, move them around to get the joints between them where I want, make sure they're symmetrical from side to side, and that sort of thing. Now inside the coverboards, the majority of the deck is made up of deck planks or deck strakes, and these are generally long, narrow boards which run fore and aft on top of the deck beams. On a traditionally laid deck, those deck strakes make up the entire thickness of the deck, so they land directly on the deck beams, and they're usually several inches thick depending on the size of the boat. On a more modern boat or an older boat that's been updated, often there'll be a sub deck, and so that might be made of plywood or some other material. It could be plywood with fiberglass on top, for example, sheathed. So that plywood would lay directly on the deck beams, and then the timber deck is laid on top of that, and at that point it's usually just a thin timber deck, which is mostly just aesthetic. Tally-Ho's deck is going to be traditionally laid, so the deck planks are going to make up the entire thickness of the deck, and they're going to be traditionally corked, so in between the deck planks, like the hull planks, there'll be a corking seam, a sort of V groove there, and cotton will be hammered into all of those seams to make them watertight, and then they'll have something put on top of them. Traditionally that would be pitch, same tar stuff that we put in the bilge of Tally-Ho. Traditionally that is poured into all the seams on top of the corking. That pitch can be scraped off to leave a flush deck, or it's often actually just left bumpy like that, and that actually gives a lot of grip to the deck, and that's a very working boat approach, which is fine. Tally-Ho is probably going to be corked with a more modern seam compound over the top of the cotton corking in the deck. Well, all this head scratching is making my brain muscle hurt, so it's the weekend and I'm going to head off sailing, and what better way to take a break than on board a beautiful schooner. So I'm having a weekend away from Tally Ho, and I'm on the schooner Martha right now, which is a beautiful boat that I've sailed on a few times since I've been up here. She lives in Port Townsend, and this weekend we're racing around the San Juan Islands. Set off in the morning. It's going to be quite a wet weekend, I think, but it's a really beautiful boat to sail, and I thought you guys might also like to have a quick look down below and see the interior of a beautifully restored boat like this.
Hello, my name is Robert Darcy, and captain of the schooner Martha. She was designed by B.B. Chronoshield and built by Stone Boat Yards in San Francisco in 1907. I've been with her for about 25 years. We've completed a major hull restoration, and we've done some work down below in the interior, but for the most part her interior is near original. Over the years, I've often worried and was upset by the fact that so many of our national treasures and our maritime artifacts are going away. They're not being maintained. And I think it's a shame, because there's a lot in the maritime traditions that are important to us as human beings. It takes a great deal of energy to maintain any vessel, but especially wooden vessels. The work that we put into these things helps increase the value of the experience. It's not just about enjoying or learning about sailing, it's about valuing our traditions and passing those traditions down to the next generation so we don't lose touch with where we came from and who we are.
Well, I'm back in Port Townsend. Some really strong weather came through. There's a storm right now here. This is the only sheltered place I could find to do a bit of recording, but out in the Straits it's blowing 30 to 55 knots today. Really horrible conditions, so yeah, we had to come back early. But today the Timber 4 Tally Ho's deck is arriving on a truck any minute, so we're all getting ready. We're going to have to unload that here in the pouring rain, and hopefully it's well covered. Well, luckily the timber was covered relatively well and the storm has cleared now. We're going to be getting inside the building very soon, as soon as we've got some other stuff out of the way. But I just wanted to thank everyone who was involved in this timber, from the milling to getting it across the border. There was multiple hurdles, and had some really amazing help and support from this community. So thanks to everyone who was involved in that process and everyone who reached out with suggestions. I really appreciate it. I'm really confident that this timber is going to make a really good, long-lasting and beautiful deck for the boat. It was the most sensible choice, I think, in regards to the economics and the durability and sustainability and so on and so on. There's a lot of aspects to take into consideration, and it's not cheap, so it's a pretty weighty decision. But I think I'm really happy with this timber. It does look beautiful from what I've seen, and I'm really looking forward to getting it down on the boat. Now along the centre line of the deck you often find king planks, and that could be one plank or several planks that are wider than the regular deck strakes. The king planks and the coverboard, because they're wider, it's more important to use a stable timber, and so that's why on Tally Ho I'm using teak for those planks, but not for the narrow planks. That's because the wider a piece of wood is, the more it can move, and so lots of narrow planks joined together will be more stable than one really wide plank. Now obviously near the ends of the boat, where the boat gets smaller, there's less space for planks, so you end up with less planks, and so those planks have to end somewhere. And as they end, they would feather out, and they sometimes do feather out onto the king plank or the coverboard. But generally that feathering is considered not to be so good because it's weaker where it gets really thin, and it can also splinter up. So what is normally done is we put nibs in the deck planks, and so that's just a little flat spot on the end, and so the deck planks will nib into either the covering board or the king plank, and that depends on whether the deck is a sprung deck or not. So this deck is a straight laid deck. You can see the seams of the plank are straight. Generally that's a bit more of a working boat style deck. The other deck is a sprung deck where the planks actually follow the shape of the outside of the boat, and in that case they will bend round or spring round, and then those nibs where the planks end will actually be in the king plank rather than in the covering board. So now we've discussed the two most common types of deck, a straight laid deck and a sprung deck, but Tally Ho's deck was actually neither of those. It was what I would call a semi-sprung deck, and what that means is that the planks do spring in, they do follow somewhat the shape of the outside of the boat, but they're not quite as curved as the outside of the boat, and so they follow a line somewhere in between the straight line and the line of the outside of the boat. And what that means is that the ends of the planks, they actually nib into the coverboards and the king planks. Now to get the best curve and the best shape for the deck planks, I worked with a friend of mine who's a naval architect, and we made some drawings which show the ideal curve of the deck plank and where all the nibs are going to go. These drawings are really just a starting point because the widths of the coverboards changed and the king planks changed and the margin boards all changed, but the curve of the planks was really useful, and so I took that master line of the plank that runs all the way from the bow of the boat to the stern, and that was the first step towards actually getting those plank lines drawn onto the deck beams. So all the deck strakes are now properly laid out. I've marked where each stroke is going to land on each beam. We've got our master line marked out. We've got each nib for each deck stroke is marked on the coverboard positions and on the king plank positions. The king planks are lined out, the coverboards are lined out, and all their scarf joints are lined out as well. So I know which piece of timber is going in which position, and then those scarves of the coverboards have to not interfere with the bore extensions or the nibs for the deck strakes. So it's got a lot of juggling going on, but I'm really happy with how it's all lined out now. I think it's going to work pretty well. Right, well that's it for now. I hope you found this video interesting and not too technical or boring. There has been a bunch of other stuff going on here in the last week or two as well. As you can see, there's some seams getting filled behind me on the port side of the boat. And so I'll be catching up more with all of those jobs and getting back to some good old woodwork very soon in the next video. But for now, thanks a lot for watching, and a massive, massive thank you to everyone who has donated or otherwise supported this project. It does make a huge difference, and it means that we're able to keep on doing this work, and I'm able to keep on making and editing these videos. So I really, really appreciate it. And I'll see you next time. Cheers.